Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to our international audience in Brazil, Mexico, the US, Europe, and in India. My name is Marion Hebach. I'm Head of Global Communications at Leadec. I'm located in Stuttgart, and I would like to welcome you today on World FM Day to our webinar, How Smart Factory Solutions Drive Value in TFM. We hope you find value in the next 60 minutes for your business and that you can benefit from the insights and experience we present. Our speakers hold various key positions within Leadec, which relate to facility management, innovation management, and the manufacturing industry. You will hear Bernd Voelpel from Germany, our head of the Smart Factory Group, Andy Candelent from the UK, Head of Facility Management, and Tim de Wit from the Netherlands, Head of Key Account Management, Manufacturing Industries. Let me quickly walk you through the agenda. The first part centers around the disruption in the industry, the search for value drivers, and the feasibility of end-to-end solutions. The second part focuses on commercial models and outsourcing strategies to support innovation. We will then open the floor for questions and discussion. Some notes on housekeeping. Everybody can use the chat function on the right to submit your questions. Or if you want to speak up vocally, then please raise your hand. You can raise your hand on the bottom right next to your status. If you click on settings, and then there's a blue sign to raise your hand. We will then unmute your mic and your camera, but you yourself also then please have to unmute yourself. But we will explain that later again. For your information, we will record the presentation, but the Q&A session will not be recorded. So please feel absolutely free to fire away then. So much for an introduction. I would like now to hand over to our first speaker, Bernd. Bernd, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Marion, for the introduction and the kickoff. I trust everybody can hear and see me. And from my side, also a warm welcome to wherever you are around the globe. Well, on the agenda, the first item says an industry in disruption. And I want to touch on this for a moment with the first slide saying digitize or die. And that sounds quite scary, isn't it? But actually, I don't want to scare anybody. I want to instill a sense of urgency. And I hope that in the rest of the webinar, we can give confidence and show that we better digitize and nobody needs to die. So in order to do that, I want to show you this slide, which depicts the most valuable companies globally in 2008 and today. So if you look at 2008, you see out of the 5 companies, 4 coming from the oil and oil extraction industry. And if you look at today, it has dramatically changed. There is no oil anymore. There's only data-based companies like Apple, Alphabet, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook. And actually, if you continue the list, it will go on like this. So that means that what was the oil in the past, the foundation of our world economy, is now data. This is probably not new to you. You have heard it before, but it is just important to understand what the implications are. Give you another data point here. The overlap of the Fortune 500 today and 50 years ago is just 10%. So what was driving value in the past not necessarily does so today. Now, what does that mean? It means that we have to change. It means that we have to reinvent ourselves. And that's actually not a choice. It's a must. We just have to do it. And if you consider data being the new foundation of our industries, you also have to look at some specifics that are different between oil and data. So for example, data are neither consumed nor used up. They can be used multiple times. They can be shared with others. They just don't go away, and they don't cause problems maybe like CO2 does. Anyway, if you look at data, that has an impact also on the value chains. It is evolving more to value pools. The economic playing fields are changing. Platform economies are evolving. It's just the way we do business is gonna change in the coming years. So again, reinventing ourselves is not a choice. We have to do it. All right. I want to pinpoint still 3 key elements how data economies are taking shape at the moment. Point number 1, we see ubiquitous connectivity everywhere. A while back, I would have said ubiquitous connectivity is emerging, but it is really happening. It is there already. We can connect machines, we can connect sensors, we can connect production data, quality data, and bring them together. And I already mentioned that this opens the door for platform economies. It opens the door for new ways of working, meaning new ecosystems are emerging. And with that also come opportunities for business model innovations. So how you monetized your work in the past might not be the way you monetize it in the future. Now, I'm a German guy sitting here in Germany, and I think we are in our nation quite known for a first time right and striving for perfection attitude. And that not necessarily is always helpful going forward, because I was talking about a change of way of working also. And it is more important in the future to agile, interactive development, try out, improve, learn from it, roll it out, and then don't forget to scale. Because we are not here to do just pilots and proof of concepts. We want to create new business. We want to take our share, our piece of the cake. And that's why it is important to adjust also the mindset, the culture, how we do things. My colleague Tim will come back to this a bit later. So again, at the beginning, I was saying I don't want to scare anybody. I don't want to picture a gloomy world. No, I actually believe that there are opportunities. There are plenty of opportunities. I don't know if it will be a gold rush, but it's not the change that we should be afraid of, but it is the chance that we should see in it. And having said that, I would like to hand over to my colleague Andy, who will tell you a little bit more of how value can be created.
Morning, good afternoon, good evening, and a very happy World FM Day to you wherever you might be joining us from today. Leadec aims to be a long-term specialist partner for manufacturing infrastructure services. As you can see from the visual on the screen, we provide support from a single source throughout the life cycle of the factory, from the design and installation engineering stage through automation, building services and fabric maintenance, through to relocation, refurbishment, or even replacement of your assets. Leadec operates a bespoke IoT business platform called Leadec OS, and this digitally captures our processes throughout the property lifecycle. Leadec OS is designed to be technology neutral, so it can interface seamlessly with any existing technologies you may have, whether those are financial, operations, or building control systems. It's a brief overview of Leadec business. As you can see in scale, Leadec is a global service provider. We have near to €1 billion in annual sales around the world, servicing more than 300 customers in 14 different countries. Our 18,000 employees have secured multiple customer awards over the last 10 years, and that customer satisfaction is also is also demonstrated by our renewal rate, which is in excess of 95%. In total, Leadec has 60 years industry experience, trading under various different entities of the organisation. And we also have a very high safety rate with an accident frequency of less than 1.7. A key challenge for manufacturing industries today is how to optimize the maintenance strategy for your plant and infrastructure. Traditionally, maintenance has focused very much on the planned preventative maintenance regime, which utilizes time-based scheduling for maintenance activities using standards such as the widely recognized SFG20 standard. And maintenance is performed regularly into a defined specification with the intention of minimizing the risk of any unforeseen outage. Alternative maintenance regimes are available, such as those that you can see on the right of this slide. So condition-based maintenance and reliability-centered maintenance, for example. These approaches can offer advantages compared to the generic PPM model, but they too have limitations. These are dependent on scheduling upon the basis of historic models of wear and tear or an asset condition, and these work best when the patterns of asset utilization are stable and predictable. In the manufacturing environment, this is often not the case. Manufacturing premises often place much greater and less predictable levels of wear and tear on their infrastructure assets. Majority of manufacturing operations are subject to fluctuations in product demand and hence the consequent levels of production. This means that levels of wear and tear on the infrastructure assets of manufacturing facilities are both less linear and less predictable than those that you might find, for instance, in a corporate office environment. Many manufacturing plants have assets added to or changed frequently as the business grows. And many organizations operate from long-founded premises, often with building infrastructure ranging from the very new and recent builds to buildings which are sometimes decades old, all on the same site. Similarly, assets are often frequently varied in make, model, or working parameters. The variable production schedules in manufacturing premises create huge variations in the pattern of wear and tear that you can expect. And this means that the generic time-based or condition-based maintenance schedules that are used elsewhere are often not suitable for manufacturing premises. So Leadec has leveraged our decades of experience in supporting the manufacturing environment to develop more advanced and more fit-for-purpose maintenance regimes. You can see on the left-hand and lower side of this slide the traditional approaches to maintenance, which are often those that have been applied in plants and manufacturing premises that our maintenance team may inherit. So they've typically been subject to varied maintenance regimes ranging from little or no maintenance, fixing assets when they break only, the generic PPM scheduled maintenance approach that we defined earlier, to some more proactive and some predictive measures. However, recently there has been a paradigm shift in maintenance strategies, and this has been piloted by Leadec in adopting risk focus and optimized maintenance regimes. Using the risk-based optimized approach, Leadec assesses the risk, and assets which present the greatest production risk or those with little redundancy capability are prioritized for maintenance input and maintenance spend to mitigate any risk to the production cycle. Maintenance on other less critical assets is optimized to reduce any unnecessary spend without the risk of impacting your production or compliance. These solutions are enabled through the application of Leadec's factory and analytics services. And this helps to deliver two key enablers in the transformation of asset management. One is the digitization of maintenance workflow and advanced predictive capabilities. This involves the real-time capture of resource performance optimization of labour utilisation through the use of augmented AR technologies, and dynamic task scheduling and work assignments. Predictive maintenance includes online monitoring of asset performance, early indication of potential failures, and the use of varied and multiple data sources, for instance, through sensors measuring inputs such as temperature and vibration, which allows early maintenance intervention to prevent failure and the consequent disruption to your production. So what does this optimized maintenance regime look like at site level for you? Initially, your assets will be surveyed for condition and assigned a criticality rating based upon the risk we referenced earlier to either safety or productivity. A bespoke maintenance regime is agreed on the basis of this criticality rating. This prioritizes safety, the availability of critical assets, and overall equipment effectiveness, whilst reducing the maintenance effort and spend on assets which are identified as non-critical. The optimized maintenance regime is augmented by sustained IoT-based condition monitoring. The optimized maintenance regime is continually adjusted as we employ measures such as machine learning to measure the degree of wear and tear as different wear patterns are applied. The advanced predictive capabilities provided by our factory analytics allow continual adjustments, so even incremental changes in the patterns of use or wear can be reflected and your OEE optimized. So that is a brief outline of the optimization of maintenance regimes. I'll now hand back to Bernd.
Yes, thank you, Andy. So we heard a bit about paradigm shifts. We heard how to optimize maintenance regimes. What I would like to do now is to make it a little bit more tangible and look at a few examples. Andy already mentioned the term factory analytics services, where we believe that we can deliver benefits through digital solutions. And those key benefits are reducing the risk. Andy was talking about risk as a new focus in how to do maintenance regimes. It's about reduced downtimes. It's about improved productivity. And it's about improved product quality. So as I said, a few examples here. From left to right, health and safety, or more precisely air quality, I think is an obvious case at times of a pandemic. So we installed and developed a solution where we can monitor air quality and derive actions from that. The next thing, equipment condition monitoring, for example, for compressors, for example, for vibration analytics of pumps, motors, chillers, filters, is another important domain where production equipment maintenance and technical facility management can look at. We do have a partnership, a European partnership with BP Castrol on fluid management. Also here, the way we monitor and maintain coolants, lubricants is a new level that we develop here. Autonomous vehicles, in particular looking at autonomous cleaning robots, is an interesting domain. You can identify where are they going, how much water do they use, how many mileage do they make, and of course this information can be used to gain valuable insights to optimize and to manage risk. Manufacturing quality score on specific processes like welding or coating, spray painting, paint jobs, for example, another relevant domain. A lot, if not all, our customers are busy with low carbon and less eco footprint factories. So waste management, recycling or non-recycling are important domains as well, where understanding what's going on is important. And last but not least, Andy mentioned at the beginning already how important safety in general is for a company like Leadec, but also robot safety in terms of collision avoidance, cycle time optimization, not necessarily safety, but in that case, improved productivity are important elements. So this slide just outlines a few examples of where we did proof of concepts, where we prove that there is value, and where we can now do the next step. How can we harvest that value? How can we use our experience, our insights, our learnings to address this disruption and this paradigm shift that we were talking about earlier? So I want to share now our key findings from the POCs we did. And that's not exclusive or exhaustive, but it's just the highlights. At the center, you see trust between partners is key. We talked about shifts in ecosystems and value chains, and that means new way of working, and you need to build trust in order to get anywhere. I will come back to that in a minute. I think what is very important to emphasize for us is this element. Assess the value. I said earlier, we do not want to do proof of concept after proof of concept to be followed by pilots. No, we want to understand where value can be created, either by addressing a pain point or addressing an insight, a vision where more value can be created. So dive deep to assess where the value really is. Is it in saving labor cost? How? Is it in reducing wastewater consumption? How? Is it about consuming less fuel? Is it about less mileage for forklifters or autonomous guided vehicles? Look at that and quantify it. Another element, get connected. In order to then really understand what's going on, you need access to the data. I was talking about ubiquitous connectedness. Yes, that's possible. You still need to do it. Get connected in a transparent, safe, secure manner to start collecting the data. And then be prepared for transparency. There will be findings you didn't expect. There are also concerns with your partners, with your customer, maybe with your own people who don't want certain things maybe to become visible. But true value can only be realized if transparency is granted. What is also important is once you get connected in a transparent, safe, secure manner, you get a lot of data on the table. But the data itself has no value. You need to translate data into insights, into information, and that's where the value is. And that's not easy. And that's maybe a competence which you need to build, which you don't have at the moment. Now, bringing industry-specific competence together with data science, the ability to process large amounts of data, that is something you need to think about. How do you do that? And last but not least, remember, this is not about a dark factory in the sense that you don't have people and there's no light required anymore. There is still physical activity at the location going on. And that brings me to what I will talk a little later, end-to-end service delivery, from getting connected to physical action at the end. But before I go into more detail on this, I still want to talk for a moment on our recommendation for success, which is establish a win-win. Tim will also talk a bit about this later. It is about we, it's not about me. So what does it concretely mean? Once you have established the value I was talking about, where is the value? You have to think about it. How do I fairly share that? Yeah? Who can benefit from this? And is it really valuable to go after certain things? For example, what's the value in preventing a downtime of an air compressor when a backup compressor is already installed for emergency reasons? Then maybe it doesn't make sense to look for avoiding downtime on a compressor in the first place. What if the value of a monitoring production support equipment is under a 5-year contract when it hasn't failed for the last 10 years? Is it then just basically an insurance that you are investing into? Do you really want that? So be clear, where is the value and how to allocate the value. Who benefits from an avoided downtime? Is it you or is it your customer? If you avoid it and the customer benefits from it, think about discuss openly with your customer, how are we going to share that? So that's what I mean with establish a win-win. Another element, do not underestimate the requirements for data-driven end-to-end services. I mentioned it on the previous slide already. Once you have the data connected and you can acquire them, the sensors connected, you can acquire the data, you have to go through this sequence until you can really trigger data-driven actions. Don't underestimate that. But now I come to end-to-end services, which I mentioned before, because I believe that that is really a paradigm shift in the way we can bring value, we can deliver additional benefits to ourselves, to our customers, and to the players in the ecosystem. Now, what do I mean with this? If you look at that picture, it is pretty simple. You are on premise, you have, for example, a sensor, can be a machine, can also be a quality system or production data. Anyway, you have a source of data, which via a gateway sends the data into, in our case, a cloud-based system, our Leadec operating system, which we use to drive and digitize our corporate processes. So you get the data in, and then this chain I showed on the previous slide starts. You have to enrich them, to structure them, to visualize them, and you gain insights from that. And from those insights you learn, and you can define actions. You can send a trigger, hey, something needs to be done. This pump needs a new bearing. This filter needs a new filter. This chiller needs to be maintained, and you can plan that. And then, as I said earlier, there's still physical action required. Somebody needs to go there and do it. And we have in several of our pilots now implemented this whole chain from a sensor to the action at the end, without an Excel file in between, without paper in between. It just goes seamlessly and digitally. And that, remember, that's what I meant with there is an industry disruption in the way we do business, in the way we deliver our services. And by the way, if I consider this here the inline sequence, then there are additional benefits which are outside that line. For example, the data you collect, they can serve for documentation purposes. They can be proof, they can be evidence. You can learn. The more insights you gain, the more you learn over time or across sites. You can give transparency, which I mentioned earlier, to your customers. This is what we did. This is how we did it. By the way, did you know that this is what's going on your factory floor, shop floor? By the way, comparing anonymously with competitors, this is how you are performing. Or you can use it also for planning, for optimized planning of your activities. For example, if you need a new bearing for a pump, you need a spare part, and you can plan getting the spare part into your spare part warehouse up front. And last but not least, I was talking about end-to-end corporate processes. At the end, you want to collect money, you want to send an invoice. And that depends, of course, on the business model. Maybe you don't send an invoice for every action. Maybe you send an invoice only once a year because you operate the whole thing. I don't want to go too much into new business models because Tim will later talk about this a bit more. So this is basically what we're after. And what I want to explain on the following two slides is now a bit more, how did we actually do this? And this is a complicated slide. I don't want to go into all the details. Let me just quickly explain what it shows. There are factories here, customer factories in blue, our factory sometimes in orange. And we have the ability to connect it, get the data into our platform, which is within the Leadec OS domain, our IoT home cloud. So it can host data, it can process data. You saw what all is part of that on the slides before. Then we have our Leadec service platform where our workforce is assigned tasks. So where we say in the shift in the morning, this is what you are going to do, this is what this one's going to do, and the next one is going to do. And it could be that here, as I said, a machine sends information in here that is translated into insights, into a trigger that lands here, where then a task is planned for a worker to go there and fix it. So that's our inner circle, I would say. What is also important, and maybe even more important, is that the industry is working towards this direction. So our key customers, Volkswagen has the industrial cloud. All our customers basically are moving into other or their own platforms to which we have to connect to, because transparency becomes so important. Exchange of information becomes important. Yet it has to be done in a transparent, seamless, flexible, and secure manner. And remember that I had on one of my earlier slides the word you need to build trust. And trust is actually not just about shaking hands, looking into your eyes and say, hey, let's trust each other. Yes, there might be contracts, but the entire platform that you are working, the architecture you're putting in place should be able to address this need for trust. And I just, for a few examples, show here security and safety elements that can help in that. So for example, in terms of security, features are that there are regular security audits of the platform infrastructure, or that you have automated pen tests, authorization testing. You need central identity and access management. So that is not only true, by the way, for people who have the right to access certain things. It's also true in the times of Internet of Things for devices, for appliances that have the right to send data or to read data in this whole process chain. You might have different customers, multiple clients in systems, and they all need to be able to see data, but only on a need-to-know basis. So make sure that you have separated instances for multiple clients and that it is clear how you deal with it, that you have secured APIs, that you have separate tenants, and so on. I don't want to go into all the details. If we look at safety, availability and operational safety are, of course, key. High availability of the platform is essential. We are using open source platforms because it is just a very rich platform typically. Yet open source also means that there are developers throughout the world where you have no control over what they are developing, what's the quality of their source code, how safe is it? And that's why you have to look at it and have processes in place to say, okay, this is part you can use, that part of the software you cannot use. It's not approved, and maybe you have to go an extra mile to make it safe. And of course, the last thing we want is avoidance of data. So you need to think of backups and so on. And we have chosen to go into the cloud actually because we are a firm believer that those things are not risks or threats in the cloud, but that they are much more easily addressable in the cloud because you can draw upon professional partners and suppliers that help you to manage that. So having said that, I hope that I could shed some light on what do I mean with end-to-end service delivery, what is important in order to create win-wins and to create the trust, and what were our learnings from practical examples in terms of what do you need to do better next time, what do you need to consider, and what are the core elements that drive value. And with that, I turn the ball back into Andy's court.
Thank you, Bernd. That's a very comprehensive overview. So very difficult to add much to that. So I'll just provide a few words of conclusion on ways in which smart factory technologies can drive value and enhance the efficiency and availability of your manufacturing plants. And we'll then move on to part 2 of our presentation today. So factory analytics really help to optimize productivity at the same time as reducing maintenance costs in manufacturing. Unplanned outages can be reduced as monitoring technologies allow intervention to prevent any forecast failure. You benefit from reliable and dynamic asset lifecycle forecasting, which allows you to make informed CapEx and OpEx spending decisions. A reduction in preventative maintenance activity can really deliver significant cost savings to the manufacturing environment without negative impacts on the OEE of your plant. So I think Bernd has really provided a good overview of the technologies and some of the benefits of implementation. And with that, I'll now hand on to Tim for part 2 of our presentation today. Tim.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Bernd. And good day to you all, and happy World FM Day to all the FM people out there in the world, creating safe workplaces and creating good atmosphere and workplace experiences for all the people. Well done. Keep all the good work. So today I'm going to talk to you around what kind of commercial models drive innovation, at least based upon the models that are out there currently on the market. What, in my perception, are the models that could drive best innovation in the future? It's all about keeping it running, right? The factory of the future, it's all about, like Bernd already said, there's a lot of technology out there, sensors, robots, everything, but basically it's all around how do we make sure that we keep the factory running as effective, as productive, as safe as we can. It's about encouraging the right culture, right? I mean, culture can eat strategy for breakfast, and that is really true. There needs to be an open mind for change, embrace innovation, try it, scale it up, like Bernd said, work with your partners, work with your suppliers on how can you become more innovative on the market, creating a sustainable, eco-friendly environment, and last but not least, making sure that it's productive and safe. If I look in my experience on the drivers, the typical drivers of outsourcing, typically costs and risks associated to the package. So what is your spend? What is the management cost of this spend? Is it critical? Is it critical what I'm about to outsource? Does it drive my compliancy? Is it complex to manage? Does it give me the transparency I need as a company? So it is also aligned with what is my company's strategy? We like to focus more upon our core activities. What is the value it creates for the company? What is the employee experience? Also a very important one, right? Attract, retaining talents. That's our future. That's our future aim. That's our future pain point, or at least that's in my observation a very strong point nowadays, right? So how do we make sure that on the account we have the know-how, the expertise? How can we scale it up? How can we be more efficient? How can we drive that expertise on the location? So these are typical influencers in making a make or buy decision ultimately. The optimal commercial model, and Bernd said win-win. In my observation, it's win-win-win, right? It is around how do we create a solution where procurement say, well, you know, we feel comfortable. It's at the lowest possible cost. It's cost leadership, right? It's maybe not around being the cheapest, but it's around how do we drive cost leadership. The business customer. How do we maintain their service levels? How do we make them better? How do we make them more efficient? And ultimately, the supplier or the partner, how do we keep them happy with better margin, with better revenue, with better profit? So it is all around how do we find that triangle, the middle of this triangle, to make sure that all parties get the best piece out of this agreement, this partnership agreement. So the typical models I see in the FM world, and obviously there are more out there, and sometimes there are combinations of various models. And you also have real partnership models like vested. But today I would like to focus, let's say, on the main 5 commercial models out there. Basically, going up from a cost plus model all the way up to a baseline less deal, where it is important that the data quality is a very important driver, right? So the type of contract that you potentially choose may have an impact in the required data that you as a company need to find inside your organization in order for the supplier to come up with a solution, right? And also, what is the level of risk that you are willing to transfer? And I liked what Bernd just said around trust, right? It's also the trust. You could almost draw an additional line in it. Where do you put your trust? And what is the required flexibility you would request from your supplier or partner, right? So different models achieve different objectives. So it's really a question around where do we want to be? What's the strategy of our company? How high do we put innovation on the ladder in our company? So it's really around, well, trying to figure out, what you want. So various models can be applied, right? So you could have a cost-plus model for example, technical cleaning solution, because you would require its flexibility, where, for example, for janitorial cleaning, you could move towards a GMP model or a fixed price or any other model, basically. So you could have multiple models, even sometimes with the same supplier, but I would not recommend you that. But you could have various models for the different services that are in scope. Last but not least, it is also very important, the maturity level of an outsourcing relationship. So I would not recommend, if you go for a first-time outsourcing, to move directly in towards a baseline less deal. So typically, I would advise our customers to gradually scale up as the relationships matures, as the trust increases. You can basically move up the ladder. As I already said, different commercial models drive different outcomes. So, for example, if you have a look at cost plus open book, typically it's all cost drivers are basically invoiced with a markup, with a management fee on top of that. It will typically give you a very high level of transparency. However, for the supplier, typically this does not really give a push in towards the innovation factor, right? And then if you, for example, look in towards fixed pricing models or dynamic fixed pricing models, you would see, well, you got a certain level of transparency. However, there is a drive towards continuous improvement built in this model, because every year you negotiate your agreement or your budget with the customer, and then you could have a discussion around, okay, guys, what are the innovations we see on the contract? What are the possibilities that you see on the contract? And you could have this open discussion. So this is really a cultural mind shift, which is very important. So different commercial models drive different outcomes, and sometimes you could have variations and differentiations in this. And I'm not gonna take you through all the wording here. We will share the presentation and the records to you after this webinar. So driving innovation, key principle for success for me is have the mindset, have the openness to change. Try it, scale it up, like Bernd said. Speak with your partner, speak with your supplier. But one thing in my observation, which is a must-have, or at least these must-haves for me are based upon my experience, it needs to be typically a multi-year agreement. If you expect innovation from your supplier, you can't expect them to come with innovation on a 1 year or 2 year term. I know in some regions it is sensible. It is it is typical for some countries to only give 1 year, 2 year agreements, but this typically does not drive innovation. It does not build up the trust, this long-term agreement, this bond that you should develop. So also innovation is something mutual. You do it together. You can't say, well, could you come up with 10 innovative ideas? Well, I don't like that one. I don't like that one. I don't like that one. It doesn't work that way, in my observation. It is something you develop, you co-create almost together, if you want to make it work, right? So make it part of your follow-up, your governance model, that you have a regular check, put it in the KPIs. Okay, let's have a quarterly discussion around things we see, things we could improve on the account. And again, this is a piece of advice. Common pitfalls are that typically, well, innovation is often seen as a yearly cost down exercise only. And I think, well, is that the only driver for innovation, costing down? Or do we want to create better experiences? Or do we want to create better uptimes, more efficiencies, more effectiveness, more produced per unit, per hour, per day, right? So, and ultimately this could drive savings maybe down the line, year 2, 3, 4, or whatever that the case study is about, right? So the contract needs to support change. So, and a common pitfall is that the contract doesn't support this, right? So also the driver for change needs to be there. So in a typically input-driven contract, it is very hard to drive this innovation part. So work together as a team, work together in a partnership agreement, not supplier-customer relationship. Then there's a big gap in between. Also, last but not least for me, the standard contractual gain share principle will not operate on its own. In a lot of contracts I negotiated over the years, this typical clause, contract gain or gain share, is in there, a must-have, a tick in the box, but it's often not used because, well, it does not drive what it should drive, and it really needs to have a win-win-win attitude to it. So typically the journey starts by connecting the dots. So if you have an outsourcing ambition, or if you have the ambition to put services to the market, it starts by collecting data, internal, external data. Internal is very important because most certainly if you start bundling services, probably you would have some management, internal management on top of that, maybe some headcount, maybe some invoicings. So there are more dimensions to it, right? So it's starting by collecting square meter data, asset types, asset data, the quality of the assets. So it really starts by collecting everything internally, and then defining what is it you want, what is it you would like to move to, what is your ambition, and then it is translating this journey in towards, well, financial, legal schedules. So making sure that it gets translated and put the right level of governance on top of that. And then obviously you can run the show on benchmarking, on validating the numbers and agreeing upon the principle with the suppliers. So for me, to conclude, enabling the factory of the future is like, if you want to be the innovator on the market, it really requires that you have the right commercial setup. So having the right commercial model into place to support this change mindset, have the right governance to that. So the governance really needs to be aligned to what is it you want to achieve. And last but not least, it requires a what's in it for we approach. So really try to chase this win-win-win situation.